There are secrets out there, guys, performance marketing secrets, and knowing just one or two of them can absolutely light up your funnels. Let's go. This is the Revenue Driven CMO. I'm your host, Chris Mechanic. Join me as I uncover the secrets of the world's most elite CMOs and marketing leaders. The Revenue Driven CMO is sponsored by Web Mechanics, the AI driven performance agency that makes you smarter. Tell us, what has been one of your biggest secrets to success in marketing?
Yeah, I'm going to give one that maybe is a bit of a surprise, but for me, it's about building a high performance round the clock team. So, thinking about how you can use Follow the Sun as a model to drive agility, volume, output, and results in a marketing team.
Follow the sun, you said?
Yep, Follow the Sun.
What do you mean by that?
Just use the time clock to your advantage. Have marketing working for you 24/7 by having staff forward located around the world, so that you can be executing overnight, keeping projects moving from the day to overnight, and then picking them up and starting them again in US hours.
Ah, brilliant, brilliant. So you're literally staffing across the time zones.
I'm literally staffing across the time zones. My
Wow.
current team, for example, is all three time zones in the US. In the afternoon, our Manila team comes on, and then overnight, our team in India comes on. So we are, especially for us in projects that can be executed based on direction, in like Asana, or in a ticketing based way, where we can hand off a project. I'll give you an example. Yesterday we decided to do a video. We did a bunch of quick recordings in the US, tossed it to our team in India overnight, came back in this morning, and it was 90% done, and our team here said, let's make this tweak and that tweak, and we were done. And we produced a great video for a conference we're doing next week overnight. Right. And so
Wow.
that agility and that speed of execution really creates a high performing team, but it also really empowers your senior marketers who are in the US time zone to focus on the top high value things that only they can do versus getting bogged down in tactical execution.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. So, I mean, I've heard of outsourcing. I've never heard of this round the clock, but it must enable you to produce just like a massive amount of output. How do
Yeah,
you go about doing it? Like, are you,
you can think of it as outsourcing, but like I don't think of it as outsourcing. Like what I would say is our team members, be they full-time employees or contracted employees, in Manila, we work through a third party called Flat Planet. There's other services like that, like globalization partners you can use to forward locate employees in a geography where you might not have a tax entity or might not be able to hire. So for us, we don't have a tax entity in Manila, but we do have our own entity in India. So we hire through Flat Planet in Manila, and we have our own staff in India. And again, it's all about the process of like, how do you write a really good brief? How do you be super clear on the scope? How do you lead good handoff instructions? How do you have a good tool like Asana so you can see the status of projects, know who's been assigned to them, move them through so you have super clear communication?
yeah,
Those are the foundations of it.
that's awesome. That's really cool. Where did you learn this, or like how long has this been core to your
I
playbook?
think, I've always, one thing about having companies like Intel and, Motorola is they tend to be pretty global.
Hmm.
Microsoft, for example, I used to run advertising operations at Microsoft where we had to produce the advertising for English speaking markets, but then, transcreate it and give it to the, subsidiaries around the world to use it in their markets. And we created a model where we like forward stage like a marketing services center, around the world. So we could hand that to that team. They could go execute it. They could go coordinate in their time zone with the advertising managers in each of the countries. So, using models like that. But, as a CMO at a startup, or a mid-sized company. Like I've been a CMO at companies, all the way from a series A to B to, a sub-billion dollar big division of a company. You have to think about what resources you have and think about, the smart way of doing that. And I've always run into the situation where there's never enough budget, to like my eyes are always bigger than my stomach of what I want to accomplish versus the headcount I have. And so doing this is a great way of leveraging both people budget and program budget, and not using very expensive agencies.
You're just getting started and just getting cranked up. But like so far, what has been one of your big secrets to success?
Yeah, so I think, you really hit on it in the intro too. And, I'm not going to present this under the guise that this is a secret because it's by no means a secret. However, when I think back on the success that I've had throughout my career, and the growth and the trajectory of that, it's really been because I've had the right team. And that's not sort of the luck of the draw, right? At some point it is when you're more junior, but the more senior you are and the more hand you have in who that team is and how they operate and what their structure is, it becomes really important for that to be at the forefront, I think, of what success looks like for you, because, internally building those functions with leaders that you can actually trust, that meet your mostly reasonable expectations, right? You're going to continue to push them, especially the more that they grow, and there's going to be challenges there, but within reason, and discussions that are designed in such a way to invite like new ideas and optimizations or challenge what's existing. And not only doing that with your internal team too, but is really in establishing like who those teams are that you need to partner with, whether it's an agency, whether it's a service, a tool that you need, and what do those partnerships look like to you, and how can you both, mutually benefit one another, and how can you maximize what that relationship is. And, there's that analogy right now that's like been floating. It's like an old analogy, but it's been floating out there on social a lot to explain marketing using the circus. Do you know what I'm
No,
talking
I haven't
about?
seen that. Tell us about it then.
Well, it's just an analogy. It's like, if you do this, that's marketing. If you do this, that's sales. If you do this, this is promotions, and so on and so forth. And so, but if you do all of it, that's marketing. Like,
Mhm.
that's like the big
Yeah.
reveal. And while it's a great analogy for explaining marketing, right? And that it's this orchestration, um, and helps just simplify the explanation of it to just, a normal person. What it highlights to me being in this industry is the breadth of the skill set and the team that you need in order to have a holistic and strategic marketing
Yeah.
operation. And I learned early on that, and I think it's plus by nature, that working together as a unit with clear expectations, bringing people up the ladder with you, and not being like an individual contributor, and not only being focused on like the business and the operation aspect of the role, but hiring the right people and growing them, that's where you're going to have the long-term success. It's like investing in brand almost, and like organic, like that's where you're going to see that long-term return. And plus it allows you to move forward in your roles if you've got this succession kind of plan behind you, and, and the team is operating well. So, and it's never going to be perfect. Of course, you're never going to have everybody firing at 100% all the time. And, people are going to grow at different times and all of that. But if that's what you're focused on, building a strategic and curious and performance driven team, then you're going to have success long term.
I love that. I love that. And I need help with that badly. Like I think historically, so I'm going to selfishly turn this into like a little mini consulting session, but I think the listeners will get
Yes,
value
there you
from
go.
it too. There's spectrum of leaders, right? There's like toward individualistic, and then there's like the team, the team builder. I personally am more toward the individualistic. So I've got several follow-up questions on that. One is like on team structure. So like, you
Mhm.
enter a new org. I know you've been at APEI for a little while now, but say you enter that new org. How do you first determine, you know,
Like, is it first, like people first, like you need the right people and then you'll figure out the seats, or is it seats first and then people fill up?
Oh, that's interesting. So I think that for me, it is identifying both the structure of the function. So when I joined APEI, the marketing team actually looked quite different than it does now. And so I started with establishing what were those functions and sort of lines of teams, right? That I needed to establish and really differentiate from one another. What were those functions? What were the roles? If I were to just build a team, what were the roles that I would need in order to work straight across, the number of institutions that I'm managing, the budget, etc. What are those roles? And then who do I have that fills those roles already? Who is maybe misplaced? And then, can I manipulate some of what I have in order to make this person fit? Or in some instances, they're just not the right fit any longer. And then, what's remaining is, those roles that you would otherwise be hiring that, from the outside for. So I think it's a little bit of both, because I think part of it is, not being so rigid that you can't adjust a role for the right person that comes in. But I think if you're just starting at it like 30,000 foot view and climbing down, you're looking at what are the needs of the business in order to run the business effectively. And then who do I have to fill that?
Sure. I think one of my biggest secrets is just how to really evaluate and set your creative team up to drive your business.
Yeah.
It's not something that a lot of companies really think about as a huge revenue driver or as a huge conversion and, needle mover, but it really can be if you've got the right team in place.
Yeah. And that's surprising that clients or companies rather don't think of creative as the needle mover, because I personally think of creative as the one and only eternal needle mover. Like in a world where, every day Google Ads is taking control back, Facebook Meta, they're all taking control back. This is the trend. They're all saying, "Oh, Advantage Plus, oh, Performance Max, like just give us your budget and upload a bunch of assets and let us do the rest." In that world, like I can easily foresee a world where, a lot of the media buying work is more or less automated, and almost the only leverage point is creative. So how do you go about doing that? How do you set your teams up for success, and how do you get the best possible work from them day in and day out?
Yeah. I think you're spot on. I think we are seeing a huge shift in the art and science of marketing. And as the science becomes more and more automated, more and more frankly owned by some of these companies, creative is really the big lever. And so I've had the privilege of working both on the agency side of things as well as in-house over the last 15 plus years. And over that time, I've gotten to observe and also work directly with a myriad of marketing-focused creative teams that fall all across the spectrum of really low impact to really high impact. And just like with most other things, if you observe enough samples, patterns start to emerge. And so that's really where this whole like, hey, how do I get the most from my creative team starts, is what are the patterns to observe and how to work within those patterns. And on the low impact side, and I'm curious what you've seen on both of these spectrums too, Chris, is on the low impact side, right? You see creative and market that just doesn't perform against goals. And behind the curtain, you see all sorts of dysfunctions. Basically, everything that Patrick Lencioni's book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, describes are present. It's pretty interesting. And then on the high impact side, you see performant marketing, and behind the curtains, a pretty balanced crew. Not to say they're perfect by any stretch, but they've managed to achieve some sort of balance amongst marketers, analysts, data nerds, and creatives that allow creatives to do their best work for the company.
What do you consider to be one of your best kept secrets to success in marketing?
Yeah, when you're in startup land, you got to wear a lot of hats as a marketer, and so being a ninja, right, is required.
Yeah.
The higher up you, like as the size of company, size of team increases, you got to have different secrets. And so that's what I thought was really interesting to chat about, because I'd say secret wise, the thing that no one really taught me was how to inherit a team and infuse sort of the cultural elements that you need to be able to grow, right? And
Yeah.
really understand really quickly, where people stand and how to move fast. Every CEO is like, hey, I'm going to bring in this hot shot. What's the fastest way you can deliver growth? And that's the storyline you got to have is, okay, I can deliver growth and I can be a performance-driven, head of marketing, but what am I working with? And that's the thing that I think has been the biggest secret that really nobody talks about is how to inherit a team, figure out where they are, and get to growth fast.
Yeah. And I mean, I think a lot of CMOs can relate, pretty much all of them. And especially because many CMOs, like the average tenure is not all that long.
Yeah.
So you've developed a framework, basically like a science almost, to come into a team to quickly assess, like, hey, who are these players that I have? What are their roles? What are their key skill sets? How do you get the most out of them, in the most kind of enjoyable way that vibes with
Yeah.
the culture? Tell us about that framework a little bit. How does it work?
Yeah. I like to say that CMO is the current marketing officer.
Right.
It's the tenure is usually pretty short. The ones that tend to stick around are the ones who can drive revenue. And so there are really two techniques that I use. I call it a hiring and management framework. But I'm going to talk about, I'd say two parts. One is to assess what role an individual could play on a team. So you could understand leadership, but you could also understand, the specific sort of contribution that they would make to a team. And then at the same time, on the other side is how do you assess people's skills really quick and get them to talk about that,
Yeah.
to get them to say some of the language that you need to understand. So happy to just, dive into both of those real quick if you want me to.
Please. Yeah, absolutely.
So on the role side, whenever I'm managing a team, right, if I'm coming in as a CMO, I've got either VPs or I've got other leaders under me, other managers at a minimum. And so what I try to do is I kind of work through the organization. I come in and I will do a listening tour and meet pretty much everybody I can on the team. At Heartland, we've got about a 60-person team.
Mhm.
And I had to do that work. So it's like a part of my 90-day plan is to come in and say, okay, let's get to forecasting really quick, but let's understand who we have. And so really the first 2 weeks is a listening tour and to really understand the people. And the basis for that is like, you heard Peter Drucker, right? The culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah.
And I take that pretty seriously. And so role wise, I try to understand which one of four an individual might primarily play. Okay. So what I say is, and I do this in interviews and when assessing a team. So the questions that I ask them, like, hey, there's 4 different roles that anybody plays on the team. And as a leader, I need all 4 of those roles represented. And what I'm going to try and do is figure out if that individual, which seat they would sit or which role they would play on the team. So you're either a producer, an entrepreneur, an integrator, or an administrator. Okay. And so I go through and I explain what a producer is, what each of them are. And I say, which one do you most identify with and why? And so producer, this is somebody who's willing to color outside the lines to get work done. They are milestone driven, achievement driven, and it may not always be perfect, but it tends to get done. Okay.
Yep.
Entrepreneurs, these are ideas people. These are the people that are great to collaborate with, but they tend to not get work done. And that's why they need a producer and an an administrator next to them to get work done and to keep it going. But they're the big ideas people. What's the next big thing? And so you need that entrepreneurial thought and that role on the team. The next one, the integrator. These are the people that are great at connecting systems or they're great at connecting people. I typically recognize an integrator when they have been in a meeting and they're like, why is, Sue not in here? She needs to be in here because she plays this role. And they recognize what's missing.
Yeah.
And that's why you need the integrator. And then the administrator, it's like, I think of a rail system with a train. You got the rail system, you got all the box cars, you've got the schedule and you've got the checklist, and the administrator knows how to create all of those things and checking boxes along the way to assure that work's done. But a lot of administrators, The work may or may not be done, but they have checked the box. So the quality of work isn't what I look for out of administrators. So I asked those people, which role do you sort of most identify with and why? And I typically want to have a producer, an integrator, an administrator around me because I tend to play the role of an entrepreneur on the team.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for joining us here today. For show notes and other episodes, visit us at revenuedrivencmo.com. That's revenuedrivencmo.com. And hey, exclusive for listeners of this podcast, Web Mechanics will do 10 to 20 hours of work for you for free. Literally no sales calls, no BS. Just give them a problem and they will put a team to work for you for free for 10 to 20 hours. Even if you're already a client, if you're struggling with demand gen, lead gen, SEO, SEM, Google ads, LinkedIn ads, conversion optimization, if you can't get Facebook or Meta ads to work for the life of you, or you can't figure out attribution, Web Mechanics will take a good hard look at whatever problem you give them, whatever programs you put in front of them, and they will give you an objective, informed opinion, plus some advice from 10 to 20 hours of senior level attention. And that's just because you're a listener of this podcast. So I would suggest take them up on this offer. It's ridiculous. Go to revenuedrivencmo.com/free, fill out the 2-minute form, and you will not regret it. Literally zero downside, unlimited potential for growth. So do yourself a favor, revenuedrivencmo.com/free, no hyphens, no punctuations. You will be happy about that decision.